So I have a couple of questions. So I'll kind of tag on Senator Harris. So on the budget page, you guys said development of policy documents. I wanted clarity on that because I want to know what kind of policy documents will you be doing, and how is that power, number one, delineated to you, and shouldn't that be in the hands of somebody else, such as CCSD, Board of Trustees, or even the legislature in and of itself? So I needed an explanation on what that meant. That's my first question.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to Assemblywoman Neal, I'd like to introduce Michael Venozzi from my office, who will be administering a significant portion of this. Michael has spent the better part of his career working in education policy and implementation. It's a passion for his. He's the one that created the Education Council for us at the Economic Alliance, and will be the lead project manager for us on this effort. So, Michael, if you could answer the Assemblywoman's questions, please.
For the record, Michael Venozzi, TSC Squared Group. So, kind of echoing to what Senator Harris said, Senator Neal, we are looking at doing a number of, or probably will have to do a number of projects, project-based sort of policy initiatives. So, you know, Dr. Strembitsky, for example, could be, doing a project-based initiative, or just on-call consulting, and other, organizations that we could bring in, potentially like Cornell, or, the school district has a great relationship with Harvard University. They could be really, really helpful in the development of certain policy documents and the way that to look at these things. So I think that between the expertise at TSC Squared and the expertise that will be brought on from an outside perspective, I think that a lot of the documentation and the thought that will be brought to fore will be included in that portion of the budget.
May I have a follow-up? So let me ask the question a different way. The scope of the policy you intend to get involved in, because that's really broad. I want to know if you're somehow entrenching or stepping into areas that have not been delegated to you. Do you have the authority to do it? Because it should be something that is being done by the trustees. Don't they do policy governance already? Don't they have staff create policy documents in which they will then implement and then push forward?
For the record, Michael Venozzi, Assemblyman Neal, that's a great question. I think what we would be doing is we would be drafting and proposing and going through the necessary, proposing those policies if they become necessary, and then going through the appropriate due process that for any of those policies and in all of those policies. So this is a public body that oversees and is given direction and developed regulations for the for the reorganization of Clark County School District. Clearly, the CCSD Board of Trustees has certain roles and other roles, but I think we would be developing and proposing, and we would go through that due process as necessary.
Okay. Next question. In the presentation, this is the one that's color-coded up here, you guys said that what needs to happen, and I'm not clear on if you will be doing it, projections for the individual school enrollment and the method of approaching the weighted funding formula. Isn't that already being done by somebody? Why does that need to be done by you?
Again, for the record, Michael Venozzi, through you, Chairman, to Assemblyman Neal, that is an accounting of what all needs to be done through the regulation. It is, so if you, and maybe we didn't do it or word it exactly correctly, but the intent was to show what all needs to happen as far as this regulation goes. our role is to generally assist in several different aspects, primarily related to business administration at the central administration level.
My next question, and maybe this is just your future foretelling of what needs to happen, but it says just some of the things that need to be done in the next 30 days. Resolve how CCSD and NDE are going to treat the weighted funding formula until it is fully implemented by Nevada legislatures. So what's not clear here is, what is your role? What is the scope of that role? And where did you get the expertise to engage in that policy discussion?
Michael Venozzi, again, for the record. Assemblywoman Neal, that is an accounting of what needs to take place again. There is a lot of facilitation and things that need to happen between now and then, but as the superintendent remarked in his earlier testimony, that is an unresolved issue at that time.
So just for clarity for the record, you will not be in the business of this particular discussion, or will you?
It's not our decision to make. To the extent that we can be helpful in that process, we would like to be helpful, but ultimately those are decisions made by others. We know that those things that it's coming down the line. For example, I talked with Superintendent Canaveros the other day about this exact topic, and getting this to the point where it's available to the district no later than December 1st, or as Superintendent Skorkowski mentioned earlier, it's not, he can't get his budget books done. So assisting in whatever way that we can to make sure that information gets there on a timely basis.
Okay, so just for my clarity, because I'm not clear on who others are, because I thought there was an interim committee, legislative, that had been dealing with the weighted funding formula, and Senator Dennis was a part of that committee, and it's been an ongoing issue for several years in the legislature. So who are others, for the record, so we can be clear?
Someone is ultimately going to tell the district what the weighted funding formula is. All we're saying here is that we need to get that plugged in and to assist the district to get those into the budget books so that they can be prepared by January 15th. We are not making those decisions. We're not involved in the policy. That's your folks' job. We're trying to be implementers and transition assistance. That's in this case, that's all we're talking about doing.
Okay. And Chair, this is my actual final question. Superintendent came to the table and he mentioned, because I wrote him down, he said professional development expertise was an area that he needed potential help. He also mentioned curriculum, textbook allotments. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do you fit into any of those three categories? What would be the manner in which you would fit into those categories? Or was he not even speaking about this organization at all?
I don't know specifically what he had in mind with respect to those. Again, coming back and doing an assessment in the first 30-some days, exactly what we can be working on, should be working on. It may include maybe helping to identify resources, but those are not areas that we necessarily would have expertise ourselves.